Hello, my fellow foam flinging enthusiasts. This is Andrew, aka Dart Sweep, and welcome to another foam flinging filled episode of the Foam Zone. If you're just joining us for the very first time, the Foam Zone is a bi-weekly live streaming show exclusively on the World Foam Alliance YouTube channel, streaming every other Wednesday at 8 p.m., where we interview special guests throughout the hobby. If you're an admin, you run clubs, HVZ, blaster designer, anything like that, we would love to have you on the show. So please hit us up, and we would love to get you on here. Just a couple quick housekeeping notes. Well, first of all, if you haven't already, please hit that thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to the World Foam Alliance YouTube channel. Also, if you have not done so already, please register yourself on the worldfoamalliance.org website so we can start getting these networking collaborations going. I know that we have a bunch that have already signed up, but we're looking for as many as possible. So also, we have the super chat going. So if you are interested in getting highlighted, go ahead and let's get that bell rung on the super chats going. Housekeeping notes. Maryland Mayhem, the UMBC Invitational has just announced and released the starting conditions for the Invitational for the HVZ portion of the event on Saturday. So you can find all the information regarding the starting conditions. I believe there is one blaster unlock that is one blaster with a maximum of 6 rounds of ammo at any time. I do believe you are able to run multiple blasters as well for that. But that has been announced, so go ahead and check out those details on the socials. Also, I do know that Survival Fest has announced their registration has opened. So if you're interested in joining Survival Fest this year, hit their website and get registered. Also, the Foam News Collective will be having another episode airing this week, so stay tuned for that, along with their bi-weekly podcast. And then last but not least, we've said it before, but it takes a village to build a community. So we are asking anyone that is interested and able to help sponsor or provide any donations to any of the large scale events. To please contact the admins, and even if it's $1 or $5, $10, whatever you're able to provide to help with these community events is greatly appreciated. And then also, I forgot to mention, very exciting news is stay tuned Friday, because another large-scale event should be announced, which should be pretty exciting. So stay tuned for that coming up on Friday. Let's see. We're going to do a little things a little bit differently today. Call-ins for the show are going to happen later on around 8:40-ish, 8:45. So if you'd like to call in, talk to our guests, or participate in the trivia contest that we'll be having, that is about the time that we'll be doing that. So we won't be having call-ins throughout the show, but designated time this time. So if you want to call in around that time. And my question to you guys is, if you're in the chat and you had a chance to get your hands on the newly released Dart Zone B-Car and SCAR package that was just released last week, if you got that, let us know how you like it, what you think. I had an opportunity to try out the prototype, and I got to say, I was extremely impressed. So I'm just very curious what others are thinking. I'm still waiting on mine to actually be delivered, but if it's anything like the prototype version I was able to try out, it is a cheat code, especially on the Tomcat and Dictator, and I'm pretty interested into seeing how well they perform on other barrels. It looks like they'll be able to be compatible with those. So if you have any experience or you've tested it already, go ahead and let us know what you think about those new SCARs from Dart Zone in the chat. So without further ado, I am super, super excited for this evening's very special guest. Our guest this evening, I feel like, has been able to fill the void that the community suffered once our good Captain Slug left the hobby or left the area to go do other things. Slug is now back in action, of course, as many of you know. But I definitely feel like our guest here was able to kind of fill that void a little bit. Definitely tough shoes to fill for sure. But I'm super excited to have this guest. They are one of the community and hobbies premier blaster designers, as well as they are a moderator on Reddit. Super excited to have our guest. We have none other than Silly.
Hi.
Silly, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I'm super excited to have you on.
Awesome. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. Appreciate you. So I feel like you don't need too much of an introduction because everyone kind of knows who Silly is within the hobby. But really, I was very excited to have you on here because, you know, we haven't really discussed, at least on the foam zone, much about blaster design. And I know we have a lot of people that are interested in you know, designing blasters, you know, alongside with modifying and everything. But like I was saying, I definitely feel like you've kind of filled this void that that was missing a little bit from the hobby when Slug took off. So appreciate you coming on here. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about your background and where you're from and everything.
All right. Well, hello, everybody. My name is Silly. Full username is Sillybutts, but leave that off for public events. I make Nerf blasters, such as this. I make cool things, mostly 3D printable, almost all entirely 3D printable. Yeah, and I share them for free on various file sharing websites, and people can go and download them and buy hardware kits and make their own, and edit them to make them their own in a more personalized way as well. Yeah, I make stuff.
You make stuff, and where are you located? And are you in school, or kind of like what are you doing when you're not doing foam flinging related stuff?
So I currently live in Maine. If people don't really live in the Northeast, they won't know this, but Maine has no Nerf scene at all. So
Boo!
yeah, I know it's awful. So my, blaster designing hobby, which at this point is my main source of income, is basically the bastion of Nerf in the state. And then outside of blaster design, I don't really do anything else. I started blaster design coming right out of high school during the pandemic, and because it was the pandemic, couldn't really go and get a first job or anything like that. So I decided to learn CAD modeling software instead. And Nerf blasters had been a hobby of mine for a good decade leading up to that, since I was a child. So it kind of went from, oh, I'll fill my time with blaster design and learning Fusion 360, which is the modeling software that I use. I'll use that to fill my time and wait until until like the world opens up after pandemic and all that stuff. And it kind of went into, hey, this stuff is starting to gain a bit of traction. I wonder how far I can take it. So right now, blaster design is my only source of income, and it's what I do. It's my full-time job that doesn't pay, a salary. But yeah, this is what I do.
All right. Well, very cool. We appreciate it. We love seeing all the blaster designs that you're able to come up with. Some are silly, some are super serious, but they're all a good time. So can you tell everyone how you actually got introduced to the hobby and community, just in general?
Sure. So I got into the hobby as a younger child around like the 2010s, early 2010s. And I really got deep into it through YouTube and Nerf Haven forums because, as I said, there's not really any Nerf hobby groups in Maine. There's nothing. It's completely barren. So any and all nerfing things that I saw were online. So I would watch people like Bobololo and Drac and Nerfomania, all those, Nerf YouTubers of like the first major wave or second major wave, I guess you could call it. Um, Once the hobby started kind of getting going and figuring out some of the major like shops and how to monetize blaster design and homemades that are like makeable by everybody. Around that sort of era is when I joined. And then all of my like interaction personally with other people was on the Nerf Haven forums. And it was cringy because I was a child on a forum full of adults. So yeah, I learned a lot there. So yeah, I lend some credit to that place for teaching me a lot of what I know, or at least the basis for my knowledge.
Right. So yeah. So you kind of started off as a kid, and you just kind of fell into it organically. It sounds like by watching YouTube videos and being in the forums and everything. Very cool. So once you got into the hobby, what would you say that really attracted you and kept you in it, and made you fall in love with it, and kind of evolved to where you are here today?
Well, for the vast majority of my time in the hobby until the pandemic, because the pandemic was really like a transitional point for me from
Sure.
being a hobbyist to being a uh, more involved hobbyist, I guess you could call it. But
Sure.
before then, it was a lot of just like all right, can you say the question again? I have forgotten it in my rambling. This happens a lot when I go live and my thoughts get cluttered.
No worries. Before I ask you that question, we did have a question from the chat. Mark R wants to know if you are completely self-taught in Fusion 360.
Yes. Yep. Completely self-taught. I tried some tutorials early on, but I kind of gave up halfway through, and then I just started doing things and seeing what worked and what didn't work, and I built up my knowledge from there.
For sure. We'll go into your blaster design approach a little bit later on in the show. But going back to the question was, what really was it that attracted you to the hobby? Why did you stick around? Why are you in it now? What is it that you love about the hobby?
All right. So the things that really made me stick around the hobby for so long up until the pandemic was really blaster knowledge collecting. Like it's hard to describe if you're not in that category of the hobby, but the best way that I could describe it is some people collect Pokemon cards, some people collect, figurines or something, and people like learn everything there is to know about that subset that they really enjoy. That was me for many years in the Nerf hobby. So I wouldn't necessarily go and play with the blasters because I couldn't. There was no one else around here that did that, even as a kid. So what I would do is I got really, really knowledgeable about really obscure blasters, how things worked, when they were sold, what variations there were, how expensive they were, how rare they were, all that sorts of stuff. And for a lot of years, I was collecting vintage blasters as well. So like I have multiple 95 crossbows. I have a bunch of old Supermax stuff that's super rare. I have a lot of new in box vintage blasters of various types. And that's basically what I did. I collected stuff. I made the knowledge accessible. I did like write ups and stuff like that. So other people could know what I had figured out. And then I tried my best to share that online any way that I could. And then towards the beginning of the pandemic, there was a Nerf group called the History of Nerf Modding. I joined that, and that was where I really started to broadly share stuff that I had figured out. So a lot of really obscure blaster stuff. I was finally in a sub community where I could share all that stuff with like-minded nerds, like figuring out what years did this particular blaster have this particular color scheme and when did that change. Extremely boring stuff for most people, but I found it not exciting but intriguing.
For sure. So it sounds like the blaster history behind these blasters is kind of what attracted you and kind of kept you in, just having that knowledge and base of, this blaster came out from yay, and
Yeah.
all just the history behind it. That's super impressive.
There was also the mechanical aspects as well.
Sure.
I found stuff that was interesting, and that was more interesting. Like stuff that's more complex, more interesting. So I collected things like that as well.
Now, when you were collecting, were you opening them up and tinkering, modifying, or were you just taking it at face value? I have this blaster, it's going to my collection, or were you opening up, figuring out how things were working? What were you doing when you were doing that?
A little bit of both. Like if you spend, let's say, 3 years tracking down one particular blaster that's super rare, which I did, you're not going to get it at like 1 of 10 known to exist and open it up and spray paint it and all that stuff. You're not going to do that. That's not allowed from a moral standpoint. But I did still modify things. I would go and like buy the newest blaster on the store shelves or whatever and go and modify it and have fun, take it apart, do integrations, all those things that happened during the 2010s, pre 3D printing really taking off.
Sure.
Lots of, epoxy putty and hot glue and stuff like that. Yep.
Which we still use today, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So do you recall your very first blaster that you got?
I think that I do. It's one of 2 or 3 blasters. It's either a Recon, yellow Recon, or it's the clear Raider with the 35 round snail drum off the side, or it's a yellow Alpha Trooper. It's one of those 3 because we bought all 3 of those, like my family, within pretty quick succession, but those were all the first 3 that we had in the household. And I still have all 3 of those somewhere in this messy office.
Very cool. And then what would you say throughout that time you were collecting is your most rare, most valuable blaster that you were able to attain?
Before I started blaster design, I would say the rarest I was able to get was like a Supermax 2000. Where if we have time, I could go into the rambling of what makes that rare, but TLDR, it's very rare. Costs quite a bit. Since the pandemic, they've become slightly more common as people go and like clean things that they haven't cleaned in a long time, and they come across them and sell them on eBay. But before that, that was one of the rarest. And I also had a 95 crossbow. And then since the pandemic, since I started blaster design, and I started having a little bit more money to spend on expensive hobby things, I got a new in box 1995 crossbow with all of the parts complete and stickers and everything. And I got it for $75 on eBay instead of $500. That's pretty good.
That's a steal. Yeah.
Very happy about that. But the rarest thing I currently own is a SuperTech 9000, which is another Supermax blaster. I think that there's less than 10 of them known to exist currently in any sort of like a functioning shape. There's probably ones that are smashed up or integrated before people knew that they were rare from like Nerf Haven days. But in functional condition, I think there's like 10, maybe 15 that are in like hobbyist hands. So I got one of those, and I'm quite happy with that. Yeah.
Very cool. Excellent. Well, if you're in the live chat, I am very curious to know what you remember your first blaster being, or what the rarest blaster that you have been able to come across and collect. So if you have a very rare blaster, please go ahead and let us know what that is down in the live chat comment, as well as if you remember your very first blaster. Friendly reminder again, thanks for joining us. We are here with Sillybutts, and we are discussing blaster design. Also, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button, and to register yourself and your club on the worldfoamalliance.org website. What would you say during that time were some of your favorite blasters that you
Oh,
remember?
that's so hard to 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 think about because it's been 5 years since then. But oh geez, favorite things to use, not just like have in a box in a collection.
Sure.
Um, Probably again another Supermax blaster, a Supermax 5000. That was really fun. I put a Nerf Titan air tank inside of one of them,
Mm-hmm.
singled it, got a barrel that was like 8 feet long of CPVC pipe, and loaded darts into it. Single, closed the breech, pumped it up, fired it through drywall in my room, which was not great. Well, it was astounding, but it wasn't financially great. Um, but yeah, that one was pretty fun. And then I also I actually liked the Centurion and the Magnus, the first wave Mega Blasters. Those were both really fun. Um, what else? I like the Raider and the Rampage, but I never really modified those. And yeah, I think that's all of the ones I liked that I owned. Because there was a lot of things I loved to see online that I couldn't own, like a first generation Caliburn that was like fully machined in PVC and aluminum and so good. But I don't have $400 lying around to buy one of those.
Help us, we're poor. What in your opinion makes a fun, silly blaster? Just enjoyable experience. What makes a blaster an enjoyable experience to use, would you say?
Well, mm, you have to know the kind of person who will buy the blaster. You have to like you can't just make a design and kind of like throw it out there willy-nilly. You need to kind of have your mind set on a use case and a type of person to use that blaster. For example, um, this, which is something that I've been working on, is a giant pistol. You're not going to use this in a competitive event. This is not a super accurate pump action blaster, but it is still fun. It's a giant pistol. Of course, it's going to be fun. You fire that away from the microphone. But something like that, you need to not get caught up in trying to make a blaster do everything. It's very easy to like make a pistol and want to make it, add a pump action grip and add a stock and get a barrel that's longer and more plunger volume and all that stuff. And then you might have something that works for competitive or super high FPS games like 300 FPS games, but it doesn't really fit well in any one use case. You need to kind of not necessarily pigeonhole or keyhole yourself in one niche, but you do need to be considerate of what you're doing. So, with that out of the way, you can have something that's super fun like this, where you're going for like really big, really powerful, but not necessarily I wouldn't say not effective, but not necessarily competitive. You're not trying to like get the most kills with something like this, but you might want to be doing that with something like an alchemist, where you got your pump action and all that stuff. I should probably not do this next to the microphone, but you got your pump action, you got your red dot and your fancy scar and your aluminum barrels and everything super super nice and rigid and all that stuff. But this costs more than that pistol, and this is meant for competitive. You can use it in like a low FPS HVZ game, but it really does well in competitive. You need to kind of focus on one thing. And that thing that you focus on can be raw stupidity, like this thing down here on the shelf, which is the Thumper, which is, what is that? That's 7 rounds of Mega XL. Oh, wait, no, that's 5 rounds of Mega XL, rapid fired, in a pistol format, you can aim for stupidity and it will still be fun as long as it's stupid enough. But yeah, you gotta kind of, I don't know, put yourself in the right mindset and really aim for a particular use case in order to make something that is fun and effective in terms of like not breaking or not being useless in a lot of circumstances. You need to kind of really focus early on in the design process and get that nailed out before you flesh out anything else.
For sure, absolutely. Yeah, I've silly blasters are extremely popular in the Maryland area where I'm located, and once a design goes into beta or as it becomes available, you'll see it on the field. And I remember Boomstick Mod showed up with the Thumper to an event and just looked like so much fun. And I think that's really kind of what you've been able to capture is, yeah, you have great performing competitive blasters, but also at the same time, you are able to provide really fun blasters that are enjoyable to use that are not so serious, So I think, I think that's a very admirable approach to have, being able to, yeah, we want something that's going to be able to perform, but also, at the end of the day, we're still playing with kids' toys, and it should be fun, So,
yeah.
So currently, what would you say is your overall approach or philosophy to foam flinging and the hobby in general?
The hobby in general or blaster design?
We can do both. Let's do both. Let's hear what you got for both.
All right. So my general philosophy for the hobby in general is, that's a big question. I guess the simple answer and the answer that everyone should have is have fun. That's
Sure.
what you should do. But I guess like the hobby is a very good way to connect with other people, and you can have fun in the hobby in many different ways without having to do all of the different ways.
Sure.
So you can be a blaster designer and only do blaster design, never go for any games, never buy a stock blaster, never do any painting, never do any integrations, never do a mod party. You can just do blaster design. And that is a perfectly valid way to have fun in the hobby.
For sure.
It's also a perfectly valid way to have fun in the hobby to buy stock blasters and paint them up and have excellent art pieces all over your house of blasters with acrylic and spray paint and glitter and everything. And it's all dressed up so fancy. Or you can weather it and have it look super realistic. You can do whatever you want. And that is perfectly valid. That is a way to have fun in the hobby. And that's what you should do. Have fun. You can also be a competitive Nerf player. You can go and do blaster battles at an arena, go for points, go to international competitions or national competitions. Haven't quite made it to international.
We're getting there. World Foam Alliance is working on it.
Yeah. But that's another valid way to have fun in the hobby. And you can do any mix and match of anything. And as long as you're having fun, that's a good way to be in the hobby. As soon as you stop having fun, why are you here? Why are you doing the hobby if you're not enjoying it? And if you're not enjoying the way that you're currently in the hobby, try out a different niche. There's lots of ways to have fun in the hobby, lots of different sub hobbies in the hobby, and you can do whatever you want and have a great time.
Yeah, I think that's a great approach and philosophy overall. I think sometimes we get tunnel vision into thinking this is the hobby, this is how we have to do it, and you're not even thinking about 3D printing. That's a part of the hobby, and just different types of events, HVZ or PvP. There's all these different aspects, like you said, integration, modding. But a lot of us are just so focused on playing that we oftentimes forget that there are a lot of different aspects that you can enjoy and still be a part of this hobby. It's not just, just playing and showing, which is, a large element. But, like you said, it's really whatever makes what you're doing in that hobby space a fun time and that you enjoy for sure. So what would you say your overall approach to and philosophy would be to blasters then?
For blaster design, there's a lot to talk about when discussing blaster design. But I will slim it down for a live stream so I don't go for 3 hours just talking about blaster design. But my philosophy for blaster design, let's say that I want to make a new blaster. The first thing that I'll do is I will either figure out a niche or a use case and write it down. Write down everything that you would want from a blaster in that category. So, for example, for Alchemist, you want a pump action, mag-fed blaster if you're doing a competitive blaster. That was the goal for Alchemist, was to make the best possible competitive blaster, or best possible pump action, standard layout blaster. In order to get here, a lot had to happen. So the first thing I started out with for Alchemist was making a list of goals, right? What do I want to complete by the time that this blaster is done? What do I want it to be able to do? So let's say I wanted to make a competitive blaster. What do you need in a competitive blaster? Well, generally, either bullpup or front magazine here. I went with front magazine because bullpups are a pain in the butt, and I don't like them ergonomically. But who knows? Might do one in the future, but didn't for this. So front magazine here. You have your magazine here. What else do you need? You need your pump action. Okay. You need your Picatinny on the top so people can add all their tactical scopes and garbage on top of the blaster. You need a barrel attachment of some type if you're doing competitive. You generally want a nice solid stock. So I didn't do a stockless blaster, right? I could have chopped this off here and had nothing behind it. That would have been possible with a different plunger system and all that stuff. But you want a stock for competitive. You want to be able to aim. So, stock. You want it to be generally compact and light. I didn't quite make this light, but it is compact. This is a pretty compact blaster for the FPS and the smoothness that it exhibits. And then once you get that list of like goals and stuff, you then want to start figuring out how you can accomplish those goals in either the best possible way. Like, let's say you're trying to figure this out for a plunger system, right? If it's a Springer air blaster, you can figure out either the best possible spring ratio and plunger geometry, how much plunger tube you have, all that stuff. You can figure out the best possible one. Or if you're going for a different type of blaster, you can go for what is the cheapest way that I can do this while still having it be functional and acceptable in quality. So, for example, I don't have it here in my pile, but I made a version of the Talon-Claw U that had barely any non-printed hardware. So the plunger tube was printed. It had O-rings on the inside still, but the plunger tube was printed. That was a case of, I want this to be as inexpensive as I possibly can and as easy to get the parts that you need to build one as you can. I could not have done that if I tried to replicate the smoothness and the power and, air seal and all that stuff and spring compatibility of this. You need to choose. Do you want inexpensiveness? Do you want super easy to source? Do you want super simple? Like a baby could put together the blaster. You kind of need to figure out what you want to do when you are completing each goal of your design. So, for an example, the stock on Alchemist, I didn't design this stock. This was designed by Vikinger. He's a friend of mine who passed away a little over a year ago. But I got permission from his family, and me and a guy named Chance, who was also his friend, adapted it to fit Alchemist. And we did that because this is a very good stock. Works great. And by using pre-existing parts, I was able to cut a lot of development time and prototype cycles out of Alchemist in particular. So, for example, if I had tried to design my own stock from scratch, which I did at first, didn't go particularly great, which is why this is the default on Alchemist. But if I had designed my own stock from scratch and it got into production, there probably would have been, I don't know, 10 or more prototypes of the blaster just for figuring out the stock mechanism, getting it polished and everything. By using a pre-existing part with permission and within usage rights and all that stuff, you can really cut out a lot of design time and design effort by editing something that already exists. Another example of that on Alchemist would be, I can't really show it to you, but the RAM base in there. Oh wait, I actually have one on my desk. The RAM base, which is the part where air goes through the back, comes out the front. This is a Captain Slug derived part. The metal ram is a Talon Claw part. Suppliers already have these in stock. People already have them in their spare parts bins. People already know how to make them. All that stuff already readily available. No need to reinvent the wheel. No need to use a different RAM. Works great. Use this. And then the RAM base itself, this orange part, which is the print that holds the RAM, that is also a Captain Slug derived part. There's basically nothing left of that original Talon Claw part because it's been so heavily edited that it's essentially its own from scratch part. But by going off of something pre-existing, again, with permission, if you're an up-and-coming blaster designer, always get permission for everything that you do. But by using a pre-existing part, you are able to both sanity check yourself and make sure that what you're doing isn't blatantly incorrect, like not attaching this to this in any firm way. If you just have a hole there, it's just going to fall out. But by using a pre-existing thing, you can see, oh, I see, screws need to be in there, or a collet or something like that to squish stuff in there and keep it in place. You need that. So by using a pre-existing part, you can really make things a lot easier and stop yourself from doing something stupid. In kind of rude way of putting it, but other people generally know things that are good, and there's no shame in asking for help or asking to borrow ideas or parts from other people. So using existing things are good. Man, blaster design is a very broad topic, and there's a lot to
for sure. Yeah, no. And again, we'll go into even more in-depth blaster design talk in a few minutes, but it really sounds like, your approach or philosophy is really just kind of figuring out and honing in on what you want to make, and then collaborating or use existing things to try to improve on what's already out there to create something pretty cool. So
yeah, that's a good way of putting it in short.
Yeah. So I had a question for the chat I wanted to ask when we were talking about what makes a fun blaster. So my question to the chat is, what makes a blaster fun to you? And what are some of your favorite blasters, or what are some of the fun blasters, your favorite fun blasters to use? So that's my question to the chat. So I'm very curious what everyone thinks makes a fun blaster and some of the fun blasters that they enjoy using. So if you have anything, go ahead and comment down in the live chat section. Also, a friendly reminder, we do have super chat going. So if you like to contribute and get some stuff highlighted, feel free to go ahead and get that super chat going. Would love to see what we can get going on with that. And also, also, friendly reminder, we are going to open up the phone lines at this point. If anyone would like to call in and say hi to Silly, go ahead. We'll flash that number for you once the lines are officially open. We'll get that open for you, and you can call in. And feel free to call in and say hi. I'm sure Silly would love to chat with some of you guys. We'll also be opening up the trivia question at some point. Still trying to figure out the logistics for that, but I think I have that figured out. But since we were talking, since we're already kind of in the, well, we mentioned this before we go into Blaster Design. You're from Maine. There's not many opportunities to get together and fling foam there, it sounds like. But I do remember where I met you for the first time, and that was back in 2021 at APOC, I believe, was the first time I met you. And then I had the pleasure of seeing you again at End War 2022. But where are some places that that you've been able to get to and actually have some fun and play? Where are some clubs or events that you've attended in the past that you've actually gotten a chance to have some fun and play at?
Those two are the only that I've ever been to.
Okay.
My first Nerf event of any type that I've ever been to was APOC 2021 or Apocalypse, that event in New Jersey. And that's the first one that I ever went to. Had a load of fun. Got really, really exhausted because, coming right out of the pandemic, sitting around a lot, really out of shape, running around all day with like 99-degree heat. Wasn't particularly great, but had lots of fun first event. And then after that, End War 2022, that was my second event ever. Went to two very big events, one after the other. And then End War 2022 was my second event ever. Went to all 3 days, had lots of fun, met a lot of people that I had known online for many years, in person for the first time. Great time. It was one of the best things I've ever done. It was so good. Finally being able to meet everybody, being able to also go to some of the behind the scenes things at End War 2022, being able to talk to the Dart Zone booth people, meeting Chris, who worked at Game Face, which makes a Tryon, head engineer there. Had a lot of good talks with him. With people everywhere. Yeah, it was cool. A lot of fun there. And that's the only two events I've been to.
Well, it sounds like we have a caller, so let's go ahead and get our caller in. Hello, caller. Who do we have?
Hello, General Strife.
General Strife, my man, of course. Who else would it be? How are you?
Good, you guys?
Good. So, we have General Stripe. If you guys don't know, definitely check out the YouTube channel, starting to create some content. But what would you like to say?
Because I'm about to, one time done moving everything, I'm going to work on a Mega XL size Outlaw. What would you say for size? Like, because I don't know how to properly measure the size of darts and stuff.
So if you're working on a Mega XL sized Outlaw, I happen to have an Outlaw cylinder right here and a Mega XL dart here. If you're wanting to single the blaster, just one dart in it, that's probably possible. If you're trying to keep it a revolver, you're going to chop off the entire front and keep none of it. So if you're trying to just use a Mega Dart, the barrel geometry that I generally do, I make my barrel geometry public. It's available on GitHub. You can get step files and source files and whatnot. I think that the barrel diameter that I generally do, I think is 30.5. I'm just dummy checking myself here. I think that's 30.5 millimeters in diameter. And then I usually make the barrel approximately 90 millimeters long, which is this, and it stays away from the head of the dart as well. If you have the barrel going past the head of the dart, it will rub against the printed barrel and get you worse performance. And if you're trying to get a sealed barrel on Mega XL, good luck. some people have been able to do it, but sourcing the barrel material, as far as I can tell, is hard to do. And once you get anything vaguely powerful behind the dart, the head will deform and kind of rub against the barrel, and you'll lose performance. So it's better to just do a barrel that is shorter than the entire length of the dart. And in terms of making it work in the Outlaw specifically, you can probably figure out a singled like 1 Mega XL load prime fire, load another 1 Mega XL. You can probably figure that out.
Well, I was gonna like enlarge the Mega XL. Not enlarge the Mega XL. Enlarge the Outlaw itself.
That would, like, the mechanism itself as a homemade.
Enlarge most of the shell and some of the mechanism if it's needed.
I see. You could probably figure that out. That would probably work. I think that the plunger volume of the Outlaw itself, as it is, would work for a single Mega XL dart, as long as you're just firing one dart at a time. And as long as you scale it up correctly to like fit aesthetically and size-wise, should work fine. Plunger volume as it is should work fine. Spring weight as it is should work fine.
Great question. I actually feel like I learned something there. General Stripe, you know the deal. Get off our lawn. Next caller. Sounds like we got sounds like we got another caller. Who do we have? Hello, caller. Number 2.
Hello.
Hello. How are ya? Who do we have?
Not too bad. How are y'all?
Who do we got on the line?
Hello. Can I be heard?
Yeah. Can you hear us?
Hope so.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just trying to figure out why is it not accepting.
Who do we have?
I'm really a Nerf modder. Most people would call me Mr. Insanity or etc. I just like being called Jack. Hi.
All right.
I'm a fan of like certain Nerf blasters and stuff. Like, let's go for an example. What I'm holding right now, which is the Nerf Lock and Load. It's not bad. Internal mag, not too shabby. Great sidearm. I was wondering, would it make sense if I could put the automatic slide from like a Nerf long shot on the Lock and Load? Like, just shrink it down, etc. Would that make feasible sense?
So, are you talking about the? There's 2 blasters called the Lock and Load. Are you talking about the vintage Lock and Load, or are you talking about the most recent Elite 2.0 Lock and Load?
Yeah, 2.0.
Okay. You could probably put something like that on it. I don't see why it wouldn't work. The plunger volume for the Lock and Load is kind of as far as I know. The real concern with a mod like that is, are you doing something that is worthwhile of your time? Because if you're getting like 50 FPS by the time that you're done with it, was it really worth it instead of going and buying a long shot or whatever? But I see no reason why the mod itself shouldn't work. You could probably put some sort of thing there. Yeah.
Yeah, and not a lot of people have modded the Nerf Lock and Load due to its like internal mag issues. And its last variant, which I forgot what it was called, did not do too well because it had a few feeding issues, specifically the breach mechanism for it / barrel. It locked up a lot. My Nerf Lock and Load does not have that issue, or the Elite 2.0 variant, because most of them do as well. All I did is take off the Nerf in strike barrel log, and there you go.
Nice. Looking at I'm just looking up some pictures of the internals of the Lock and Load. It looks like you could probably do a sealed breach and stuff like that relatively easily without ruining, the functionality of the magazine. A sealed breach, I think, would be pretty nice on a blaster like that. Internal mags are cool, and I like them. I hope that Nerf does more.
Yep. And one last question: would it be feasible if I get a shell mod kit for the Nerf flare gun by Fortnite, or the Fortnite Nerf flare gun. Would a shell kit work for it?
Like
The chamber
injecting
and
shells. I don't think that has enough plunger volume really. And the effort that you would go through to make shells fit in the blaster would probably be better spent making a homemade in a similar form factor that used shells from default. Shells are generally a little bit too big for the Fortnite flintlock thing. Plunger volume, not much. Shell size, not much. It probably wouldn't fit particularly well. I don't think that's a very well suited blaster for that use case.
All right. Well, nice talking to y'all.
Yeah. Nice to have you.
Appreciate you calling in. Yeah, the phone lines are still open, but at this point, I think I want to open up the since we have the phone lines open, I want to open up the trivia question competition or contest, whatever you want to call it. But before that, remember, go ahead and give us a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, and don't forget to register yourself or your club at the worldfoamalliance.org website. So this evening's trivia question, you're going to have to call in. Be the first one to call in and provide the correct answer. And this evening's question is related to something Silly had mentioned or that we discussed earlier. And the question is, what are the 3 blasters that would have been Silly's first blasters he remembers getting? So what are the 3 blasters that Silly mentioned earlier that he remembers getting when he first started in the hobby? So if you know the answer, go ahead and call in and be the first one to call in with the correct answer. And we'll see who is the winner. And of course, as always, the winner will receive a Dart Zone solo once they return back in stock. Just waiting for the notification any day.
I still need to get one as well.
Yeah. All right. It sounds like we have a caller, so let's go ahead and get them on the line. Hello, false alarm. So, but yeah, I think it's really cool that you can just take a call and just go on your computer and be like, oh, if you want to do this, you're just gonna have to do that. I'm very impressed with the amount of knowledge you're able to pull from. And again, I think a lot of that goes back to what we're discussing. So the answer, I know everyone is rewinding the stream right now, going back and looking for that timestamp to see what you said. But if you know the answer to what were Silly's first 3 blasters that he remembers using, go ahead and call in. The phone lines are now currently open. And also, if you just want to call in to say hi, feel free to give us a ring as well. While we wait for our call to come in, can you tell us, and you kind of mentioned this a little bit before when we first started talking about blaster design, but what is it that really got you into blaster design? What was the inspiration? What motivated you to get into blaster design to begin with?
Sure. My first, well, I guess what got me into
we have a caller. Let's see if we get a winner before we get rolling.
Yes.
Hello, caller. Who do we have?
Afternoon, gentlemen. It's Dirty D, aka Dead Man's Phone.
Dirty D, Dead Man's Phone. What it do? Do you have the answer for what were Silly's first 3 blasters?
Yes, sir. We got a Recon, a Raider, and an Alpha Trooper.
Ding, 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 ding. We have a winner. Fantastic. That's awesome. Did you remember that, or did you scroll back in the live stream?
I remembered 2 of them, and then I swore it was an Alpha Trooper, but I just rewinded just to double check.
That's fair.
Good enough for me.
Big brain, big brain. Awesome. Well, go ahead and congratulations. Go ahead and DM us your info, and we'll get that prize, the Dart Zone Solo, out to you as soon as it is restocked. I am patiently waiting for it to come back in stock. I know we have a little back order from winners, so we do apologize. But once they're back in stock, we'll get those out to everyone as soon as possible. So, and if not, at some point, maybe we'll just throw some thunderbolts to everyone's way at some point. But yeah, so let's go back to thanks for calling in, and congratulations again to Dirty D. But let's go.
Thank you.
Let's get into okay. Sounds like we have a caller. Do we have a caller?
Hey,
Hello, caller.
it's Misplaced Moose.
Oh,
How are ya?
It's almost Friday, so I'm doing pretty good. I didn't necessarily call in for a question because I've got access to Silly almost all the time. But something none of you brought up yet isn't so much how he designs his blasters, but what he does with them after the fact. And his open sourcing of everything that he's made, all of that knowledge gets put out there where anybody who wants to go out and design stuff can have access to it. And all my designs going forward and are going to follow that mindset, because I recognize that I don't know everything. And it really comes down to the community to fill in the details of what I don't have. And Silly has definitely pointed the way on how I believe most of us in the community should approach blaster design. And I really appreciate him for doing that, because you can see his work all over my stuff if you look hard enough.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it kind of goes back to what Silly was talking about earlier, is, working off the inspiration and foundations that others have created before you, to create something that works for you. Yeah, absolutely. Being able to have access, readily available access at your fingertips for these kind of things is, you can't say enough about that, because like I was saying, every time there's some type of new design or blaster from Silly, you're going to see it on the field, no matter which club. Eventually, it's inevitable. So the influence and inspiration is definitely there. But again, it's working off of that foundation, being inspired by others, and really kind of coming together as a community and collaborating together on creating some really fantastic stuff. So
I definitely try to make everything available as much as I can. I really want people to not just use my blasters, but learn from them in a design sense. I want people to be able to look at something and be like, hey, I want to make my own blaster, but I don't know how to make a catch mechanism. They can go to my files, they can look around at them, see, oh, that's how you do that. And they can either directly copy it straight from the file with, permission, or I put everything out under a Creative Commons license, so you can do some things with it, or you can just look at it and learn how to make your own. And there's a lot of that in Moose's work as well. He does a lot of excellent stuff, and I'm happy to share my knowledge with him and try and get things done quicker than if you're trying to do everything from scratch. And he does some great work. Love it.
Sure. Well, appreciate you calling
Thanks,
in,
Billy.
Moose. It's almost Friday. Hang in there. We'll talk to you soon.
All right.
All right. Okay. All right. So let's get into blaster design. This is going to be what is it, 9 o'clock? Right? We'll allow it. We have Silly on, so I'm loving it.
Rambling. Woo! Going till 11.
Tell us how you got into blaster design. And you mentioned it a little bit before, but in detail, tell us how you got into blaster design, where it started, what inspired you, and what was the first blaster that you ended up, or some of the first designs that you ended up doing to begin with.
getting into blaster design really began during the pandemic. Had a lot of free time on my hands, being a high school student, kind of learning how to use the software first, and then starting to make my own things. The things that most influenced me during my first designs was pulling all of my experiences from lurking and looking at the Nerf Haven forums for a decade before, starting to make my own things. My first homemade that I made wasn't a from scratch design. It was a set of new internals for a 95 crossbow. And, it's a very basic pull back, catch slides into place, let go, and then pull the trigger and it releases the catch. There's no magazine. It's just a hopper on the front. Very basic 95 crossbow. I changed my personal one up a bit by having it prime out of the front. So you'd have the blaster in, your shoulder here, and you would grab it from the front and pull in order to prime. And that was my first design. Just something not necessarily better than had existed before. It certainly wasn't better, but it was interesting, and I like things that are interesting. And that was my first design. So everything from there followed much of the same mindset of doesn't necessarily need to be the best thing on earth in terms of performance or fire rate or anything like that. It needs to be fun to use and interesting. So as long as those two things are accomplished, I was happy. So my first 3D printed design, the first one, absolutely the first one, was a foregrip for a Caliburn that made it look like the original machine Caliburns. So it was like a PVC Y, but it was 3D printed because I couldn't find one that was for sale. And I printed it with all of the mounting stuff and whatnot for a modern Caliburn to use that super old part. That was the first blaster model that I worked on. The first full proper design that I did was a Slamfire kit for all of the Captain Slug blasters. So the Talon-Claw U, Caliburn U, Talon-Claw V3, Caliburn V3, all those blasters. And the Talon-Claw V4 and Caliburn 4 hadn't been released at that point, so I didn't have those. But I had a kit where you could replace the top Picatinny rail of those blasters with my thing, and then you could slam fire the blaster. Just hold down the trigger and run the pump grip back and forth to fire a lot of darts. Slam fire isn't necessarily practical, but it was a fun design challenge, and yeah, that's what I started out with. In terms of my first homemade design, like myself, all my own bits, like my own blaster concept from start to finish. I had a lot of different designs kind of being worked on at the same time back then, and I still do now, where I'll start one design and work on another one while I'm waiting for parts, and then I'll work on another one and kind of go on tangents and be like, oh, if I tweak this part of this design, I can make a whole new blaster that does something else, and I'll go work on that while the first thing kind of sits there and I wait to finish it. But the first released homemade design of my own, I think we can say, was probably the Magbow, which was awful, but I did release it publicly. So I think that qualifies. It was essentially actually, I have its successor here, but it's not this, but it was this sort of layout where instead of this up here, let me unscrew this. We can talk about this blaster later. But instead of that, there was a magwell up here with the darts sticking down like that, and it was a bow where you would pull back and release, and it would chamber a dart, fire, and then have a new dart come up into the chamber, and then you could pull back and release again, and it would chamber a dart and fire. Essentially, it was like a slam fire version of the Caramel Designs skewer, which is a T-pole blaster, which you prime back and then push forwards the T-pole again to chamber a dart. Super cool design. Has a rod going through the middle of the plunger. Super neat. But the Magbo is essentially a slam fire version of that, where it didn't have a trigger. You would just pull back and let go, and it would chamber a dart and fire. Except that it sucked. It was really bad. The getting a trigger mechanism, or not necessarily a trigger that you pull, but something that trips the catch to release the plunger, in a reliable fashion without having any like hand force going on it, because it was all bow arm powered. You had bow arms coming out like this, going into the T-pole. So when you pulled it back, the spring itself caught in the back of the blaster. And then when you let go, it was the bow arms, which were super weak, not providing power to the blaster, just returning the firing mechanism. Those would fling forwards and chamber the dart and fire it. Getting that mechanism to work in a even remotely reliable way turned out to be nigh on impossible. It was not fun towards the ends of development, when I sunk weeks and weeks and weeks and months into this blaster design. I have so much done, and I want it to work, and it just doesn't work. Just can't get it to work fully. But that was like the first from scratch blaster design that I did, and right off the bat, when I was done with it, I was like, okay, I can't figure this out. Probably someone out there that can. So I released it for free online, told other people about it. I was like, hey, if you can figure this thing out, that would be awesome. Good luck. And it took years, but I think that someone has finally made a different blaster with that same mechanism and concept and everything that works, and I'm really happy to see it. It's from a guy in, I think he's in Singapore. He might be in China or Taiwan. He's somewhere around that region. His name is ZDL on YouTube. He does blaster reviews. But he made a pullback and release bow blaster called the Kish bow, Kish, I think it is. That functions the same way, where it has a rod going through the plunger. You pull it back, you release, the bow arms return the thing, and then it fires and releases a spring that then shoots the thing out. It uses some different mechanical concepts, like stuff from the Sweetheart Storm AEG, the automatic springer. It uses like a different breach mechanism from that. And I think it forgoes use of a coil spring, instead relying on only the bow arms themselves. But essentially, it's a version of my thing that actually works, and I love it. I don't have one, but I'm super happy to see one that actually works. Yeah, so that was the first successful, in heavy air quotes, blaster design that I did. And then I think the next thing that was successful, like fully successful, was the Thumper, which is this ugly thing down here on my shelf. Actually, this is an old version. It got a lot smaller in future versions, especially this clip. This holds 5 Mega XL darts. This clip got to like this big to hold the same amount of darts in future versions. So it got improved quite a bit. But this was the next thing that I worked on, like full focus working on it, where you prime that back, catches, and you push that forwards. It advances the clip, and I'm going to dry fire this, but you then fire and it shoots out that dart. Then you do it again, advances the clip, fire, And then if I do that one more time, this whole clip will fall off the blaster, because I was under the impression that, yes, you want your like 2-pound chunk of plastic to eject when you're done with it, so you can load a new one, because you're going to be carrying around one of these, obviously. Instead, you would break this. Yeah, very smart. But that was the next thing I released. After that version, when things were polished and the clip was kept inside the blaster when it was empty. But that was the next thing that I released. After that, I did a homemade version of the Sledge Fire, which I called the Super Sledge. That one, it got to beta testing, never fully released it because there were some issues with durability and like keeping the brake action release lever from kind of like bending and breaking and snapping. Keeping it from doing bad things was kind of a pain. And then from there, eventually figured things out, had a few more releases in there, and then the one blaster that really made it big for the first time for me, like the first full proper release with hardware kits and people like making tons of them and people selling fully built blasters and everything, was the Slab, which is the lever action.
Right. Yeah.
This guy. This was the real game changer for me. And of course, there's tons of failed projects and side blaster or side projects and other blasters in between this and the Thumper down there on the shelf. But yeah, this is the first one that really made it big.
And just so everyone knows what Slab stands for, you can go ahead and tell them.
Slab stands for, I have it here on the side of the blaster, Silly's lever action blaster. Because it's a lever action blaster, and my name is Silly, and it's a lever action blaster, and it's mine, and it's good.
So, so what I kind of want to do now is kind of like do a blaster parade, so to speak. So just kind of showcase kind of the blasters, your portfolio, and just talk a little bit about each one individually. But at the same time, for the live chat, what is your favorite Silly blaster and why? So if you have a Silly blaster of some sort, or if you've had the privilege to have the opportunity to try some out, go ahead and comment down in the live chat. What is your favorite Silly blaster that you've had a chance to try? But yeah, let's do a little blaster parade. For some reason, I thought the Silly pistol came out before the Slab.
It did.
All right.
Kinda. Sort of.
I just want to make sure I wasn't going crazy. So
I can actually cover that first because I have a bunch here on the shelf. But
yeah, so maybe let's go in chronological order in like kind of the way that you came out with stuff.
So I started out with I don't have everything that I've ever designed here at hand because it's a lot. I don't have that much space around my desk. Can't really have everything here. The earliest thing I have, I think, here right now in front of me was the Thumper, which was that clip-fed thing that I showed first.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, I had the Silly pistol. Between the Thumper and the Silly pistol, there was the Super Sledge, which was that homemade version of the Sledge Fire. And during that development, I realized that this is one of those cases when I was at the same time as the Super Sledge and also at the same time as the Slab. So what happened was, are you okay with me going on big tangents during this parade? Because I have quite a bit.
That's what the people came and tuned in for.
Awesome. So the Super Sledge. It's a homemade version of the Sledge Fire. So you would break it open in the front, load a shell in the top, break it closed again, aim, fire, and repeat. while I was working on that, I noticed that there was a Instructables page, I think is the website, where someone had made a lever action version of the sledge fire. So I think that they had it singled, so it can only fire one dart at a time, or it was single loaded shell. But either way, it was lever prime. You would have a lever down here on your grip, and you would lever prime it and close it again. And they did that by kind of linking it in to the normal priming mechanism of the sledge fire. And because I was working on a homemade version of the sledge fire, I had that same sort of basic internal layout. So I was like, huh, I like lever actions. Let's try and make a lever action version of this blaster too while I'm at it. That didn't quite fully work out, but during development of the lever action version of the Super Sledge, I came up with the airflow mechanism that then became the Silly Pistol, where this is what I call a turnaround, Turnaround. Is that how you spell turnaround? I don't know. Turnaround with an N apostrophe T on the end. So instead of being a turnaround like on a Lynx, where you have, I guess that would be like this, where you have the air coming this way, going up, and then going back that way. A turnaround, which is impossible to pronounce in person, but looks good on paper, is a turnaround that doesn't actually turn anything around. It has the air going up here, go down, then go out the front again. Doing that let me make this blaster like, I don't know, 5 inches shorter than a normal mag-fed blaster with the magazine in front of the grip and a topside prime. If I had done a turnaround blaster like a Lynx in a pistol format, it could have been even shorter. But I didn't want to do that. I wanted to do this. So I did this. And it works really well. It allows for more airflow than a pusher breach. So a pusher breach would be something like a Talon Claw ram, where you're trying to get all the air through a tiny little hole in the back. By doing this, you can have that hole be much wider without having to worry about this pointy bit, this metal bit, going into the magazine, right? And having to fit through the feed lips and push the darts out. You can have a wider airflow on this than on this. If you tried to make the hole in the front of this that big, it would be too wide to fit through the magazine to chamber a dart. By doing this, you're able to have the airflow path be super wide, but have the hole in the back where the darts actually enter the blaster and the ram actually seals like that. You can have that be the same size, but the airflow itself is not impacted majorly. It's still really big. And then there is some like considerations, I guess you could call them, that people have been doing recently, where you might not necessarily want the most airflow as you can get in a blaster. Having a little bit of a tighter hole, having a little bit of restriction, might be better for certain setups. So like if you had a Talon Claw or something like that, if you had a much wider airflow path, it might not get you more FPS because you're adding more dead space at the same time as you're adding more airflow. And the increase in FPS from having more air might not overcome the loss in FPS from having more dead space. However, I've found in my personal experience with no like A/B testing of the sort, just kind of like winging it, I found that having a small plunger volume with big airflow is better than having a small plunger volume with tight airflow.
Interesting.
So you kind of want to make the best use of all air that you can possibly get when you're dealing with a plunger volume that's small. And this is like this is the same type of tube as a Caliburn, so it's that same diameter, but it's only 65 millimeters of prime, which is, well, I don't need to pull out my calipers to show you. It's only from here to there. It's that much. That's not a lot of prime, but with that tiny amount of prime, if you put a full proper spring in this and have the barrel out to like here, you can get 300 FPS out of this. Which is nice, but wasn't necessarily the goal for this. I wanted a pistol that wasn't mag and grip. That was basically the entire thing. I didn't like mag and grip because it's just big and bulky, and I didn't want to like mess with the ergonomic changes from that, where like you need to kind of retrain your brain to stick it here instead of here, like if you're using a Talon Claw. So I made one where you stick it here. There, and you get this goofy thing. You can still fire it and all that stuff. Hope that's not super loud on the microphone, but yeah, you got a blaster. Works. The holding magwell on this, like that, is to do so you can still holster this in like a drop leg holster or something like that, where the thought process was that you would have it in a holster like this, and the friction of the holster would kind of pull the magazine out like this, and then by the time that you have it in your hand, you can then reach up front, fold it down, prime, and fire. In actuality, it sort of works. A few beta testers of this blaster did make it to beta testing. A few people used it in games and stuff like that, but as far as I can tell, only like 1 or 2 people actually used the folding magwell in any sort. And the thing that ultimately kept this blaster from being released was the folding magwell, because on these earlier versions, this would have been the version that I brought to End War 2022. If anyone saw these at my booth there, these versions, due to the way that the magwell prints and like the thinness of this blaster, it's less than an inch thick, I think, in like the body parts of the blaster, not the top side. But due to how thin it is and the print orientation of the magwell snapped off on a few examples. So, and since it's folding, that's a lot more opportunity where you're kind of messing around with the magwell and it can snap off. And once you have a mag in it, it becomes a giant lever with which you can even easierly snap it off by accident. Right. So like if you knocked this on something, this tiny little bit of plastic up here, the pivoting area, would just fly off. And then you have your magwell in one hand and you have your blaster in the other hand, and you're kind of screwed. So yeah, that's why this didn't release. And then, so this was that first blaster that I worked on after the Super Sledge, right? And we're still trying to talk about all the blasters. This is going to take a long while.
No worries. Before we continue, we did have a question from King Supreme, who wanted to know what do you think of the new Aeon and Nexus X's having a similar turnaround design to the Silly pistol?
I'm glad that someone brought that up. So I was looking at the internal pictures. I only saw one internal picture for the Nexus Pro X. Let me see if I can pull it up. Nexus Pro X. This is the benefits of having 2 monitors on your computer. You can have the video on one and cool stuff on the other internals. So in the one picture that I saw of these internals, it looks like they are using a very similar system of the turnaround where it doesn't actually fully turn around. It just kind of redirects airflow for better airflow characteristics. And I had a mock-up, I guess you could call it, in CAD blaster design that never made it to printing. That was very similar to what they appear to have done in the Nexus Pro X. I don't think they ever publicly released any. I don't think they ever released any files for it, but I'm not sure if I ever released any like videos going over the blaster or anything like that. I'm not concerned at all about there being any like stealing of ideas or any of that stuff. I'm not concerned about that in general, but especially not from this. This seems like an independent reinvention of a similar mechanism, which happens. It happens a lot. There's only so many ways that you can get a air from point A to point B and have a dart come out the front. The way that they have made this pump action, because on a blaster like this, you can't really have it be pump action because there's no way to get to the. Oh, this is the wrong one. That silly pistol. I have two different silly pistols with the same color scheme. This one is newer and it has a super heavy spring in it. But this one, with the priming of this, you can't really have any priming bars coming through the front, like on a Talon Claw, because this is where the air seal is. And it works on a Lynx that's pump action because it's flipped around. You're accessing it from the back of the plunger tube. So there's no air seal back here. There's an air seal up here. But on a turnaround didn't, you can't really get in there to prime. The way that I solved that was I had a threaded rod going in through the front with an air seal around it, sort of like a skewer by Carat Mile Designs. So it still had an air seal around it, but you could still push stuff through the front of the plunger tube. Again, never made it to printing. Don't know if it actually works. It should. But the way that they have done it seems a lot different in that aspect. It's still a turnaroundant, as far as I can tell, where the barrel is below the axis of the plunger tube, and the airflow kind of makes like a downward Z shape, I guess, to get out the barrel.
King Supreme calls it
sure
an S flow.
Yeah, like an S flow is probably a good way to put it. I'm not sure how they did the air sealing on it, because again, I only have seen one slightly grainy picture of it on Reddit. It looks like they have done the ram, the bit that pushes the dart and seals the back of the chamber, pretty similarly to this, where they have it attached to the plunger tube, and the plunger tube itself may be moving, or they have done some sort of like two different places where they're sealing the air, possibly, where when you're priming it, it doesn't have any seal up front, and then once it's fully in battery, it goes into seal up here and down here. If that's the case, and again, I don't know, that seems like there would be quite a bit of opportunity for like air leaking and stuff like that. Not sure if that's what they're doing. It might be, but until we see any better pictures or video of internals, hard to say for sure. But as it is, I'm cautiously optimistic in it, because theoretically, if it is a turnaround system similar to this, from looking at the size of the plunger tube and everything, I think that they would be getting the benefits of a turnaround versus a pusher breach, because on the original Nexus, it's a pusher breach. You're shoving all the air through a little tube behind the dart. On this, again, you have a wider airflow path, theoretically, and more opportunity for air to get through, and it looks like they have a relatively short plunger, so they're probably making good use of that short plunger by using the turnaround in this design. But it's hard to really say how effective that will be by just looking at the internals, until we see any more in-depth video or pictures of the internals, more specifically how they are doing that front air seal, because there's lots of possible ways where they could do it, and a lot of them are drastically different in how well they would probably seal the air into the blaster. But again, cautiously optimistic.
Yeah. I will say that I do believe both blasters should be available around April, so we should be able to get a closer look around that time. There may be opportunities to get a look at it at other opportunities. I can't say too much, but anyways, let's go back to our blaster parade. And I think we are running a little bit short on time, so if we can just kind of go through kind of the blasters and just discuss each one, because again, I think I don't know how briefly we can get through it, but I know there's a lot of good stuff here. But yeah, so but yeah, so
yeah, I'll go through. I should say before we're fully done with the Silly Pistol, this is a slightly newer version, which still has the folding magwell, solved some problems, but it still was kind of jank, so I never released it. This version got done like a year and a half after this version, and this version was a year ago from this current time. And I didn't work on it again after I made this prototype. So Silly Pistol was both one of my earliest designs, and it's still not released. And the DNA of the Silly Pistol went into almost every other blaster that I've ever designed. Bits and pieces of this blaster are all over everything else I've ever worked on. But never been released. I have recently, as of like last week, worked on a new version of the Silly Pistol that does not have a folding magwell, because that has always been the one thing holding it back from release, is the folding magwell. So I finally went, okay, if I want this blaster to finally be released 3 years after I started working on it, I got to get rid of the folding magwell. So I've gotten rid of the folding magwell, improving some other parts. Should finally, hopefully, be released eventually, soon-ish. I hope. So that's the Silly Pistol. It's good. It's a really good blaster. Just has some weak points. I could never really make it past in time for a full release, where you got a lot of people using the blaster and you don't want them breaking once people get them. The next blaster after this was, I actually have my YouTube uploads up on my second monitor, so I can go vaguely chronologically. Next one was the Sillymax 1400. I don't have one here, but it was a homemade 3D printed version of a Supermax blaster, which is an official line by Nerf. Previously a different company called Laramie, then Nerf bought it and made it their own, released a few more blasters and then killed it in the early 2000s. I really like it, so I made a homemade version. Uses a Titan tank inside of it, shoots Mega XL darts and Titan rockets off the front in a much smaller form factor than a full Nerf Titan. Really good blaster, really fun. If you have a Titan, go print one, because it uses all the same hardware as the Titan blaster itself. You don't really need to buy anything else, as far as I remember. Really good blaster. Again, don't have one here right now. This is actually the barrel from one of them, where it has the threads, which there's no way that you'll be able to see it on video, but there's threads there on the inside of this. Those are threads that go onto the front of a Nerf Titan tank, so you don't really need to modify it. You can just print this, thread it on the front, then shoot its Mega XL darts instead of the giant rockets that are hard to find. Oh my god, that went a lot quicker than the Silly. The next blaster after that was, scrolling down my YouTube feed, I think the next one was the Pump Action Skewer, which, so many blasters, which was an earlier version of this. This is the Pump Action Skewer V2. The original Pump Action Skewer was the next one that I worked on. Again, Skewer is a blaster by Caramel Designs. It's a really fun blaster. It's T-pull in the back normally. I made a pump action version because pump action is the best action, according to all competitive foam players. So this is a pump action blaster with a good air seal, like that. And yeah, it's a skewer that's pump action. There's quite a bit more that went into it than just kind of slapping this on the front and being good. A lot of effort went into this between both myself and some help from Taffy, the original creator of the skewer. Kind of was a collaborative project, I guess you could say, where I did a lot of the work, but he helped out a lot with the figuring out how things should work well with his design. So this was the next thing that I worked on. This thing is fun. And then Alchemist was the successor to this in my, I guess, design lineup, where, this was my best pump action blaster for a long time. Then I designed Alchemist, and that one is better than this. But we'll get to that later in the chronological timeline. The next thing after that blaster was, I think, the low hardware Talon-Claw U, which was a version of the Talon-Claw U by Captain Slug that had no hardware in it. Or not no hardware, but it had like 2 O-rings and a rubber band, and the rest of it was 3D printed. And it mostly worked. I made it openly available online. People printed them, and it's kind of morphed into something much larger than I originally made. I made a blaster, and then a bunch of people over years, mainly people in Europe or places where you can't really buy normal blaster hardware, they have developed it a lot more than I originally did. And it's kind of turned into its own sort of like mini ecosystem where if you're in, say, I don't know, Norway, you can't really find Imperial hardware for Nerf Blaster. You can 3D print most of the blaster, and with the changes that people have made over time over there, you can kind of get it into a much better state than I had originally made. Because the low hardware Talon-Claw U was basically a blaster that I put together so I could have something cool at the table at NWAR 2022 when I had my vendor booth. So,
which you didn't even end up doing, because I remember a pile of blasters just were on the floor, and that was your display.
Yeah, there was a lot there. I decided if I'm going to one Nerf event every year, I might as well bring everything to that event. So I had like 2 giant duffel bags. I brought like 40 blasters or 30 blasters or something like that. It was a lot. I'm not doing that again at Maryland Mayhem when I go this year. I'm slimming down a bit. The next thing that released after that was the version 2 of the Thumper, which was that harmonica clip fed thingy shelf. I made the V2 of that, which was a lot smaller, more compact, worked really well. That went for sale on Out of Darts and Silver Fox and all those shops that people normally sell my stuff at. That one really is the point where the Thumper took off versus the original one, where it was way too big. Kind of slimmed it down, made it more reliable, added more ammo types, and that one kind of did a lot better. It's still not an extremely popular blaster because it's very niche, but it's fun. I like it. I'm quite proud of it.
Extremely fun. Extremely fun.
It's good. Go build one. After that was when I started working on the Slab. And the Slab is the blaster that people will most likely know. If they know a blaster from me, they will most likely know the Slab, which is the lever action blaster. Silly's lever action blaster. I didn't put it over there. Where did I put it? I just had it.
Just had it.
Oh, here
just had it.
Did put it over there. I have a chair with blasters all over it, and then I have my floor also covered in blasters because I have a lot to talk about. This is the Slab. It's a lever action blaster where you got your stock back here, you got a lever, you prime it, you pull it back, and then you fire. It uses a turnaround right here, sort of like a Lynx, where you've got air coming back, going up, and then out the barrel. And then the thing about the Slab is that the magwell moves. Ram itself, the bit that pushes the dart into magwell, is stationary. So you can see it kind of like that. Pretty good. Having the lever set up like this means you do actually get easier prime from the lever, as opposed to something like a sling fire, where it's done that through gearing. With this, it's all actual leverage on the blaster. And something like a Busby Sentinel, I think, also does it in a vaguely similar way, but it doesn't actually make the prime easier, as far as I know, on the Busby Sentinel. So this one is pretty easy to prime. I like it. It's really good. And then this is the first blaster of mine that really made it big, was super popular, still is super popular, and I'm quite happy with it. I do need to make an update to it sometime, because this was the first one that made it big, which means that there's a lot of things that have changed since then. Like, for example, how the plunger head attaches to the plunger rod, durability things for some of the parts on here. But yeah, this was the first thing that really made it big. And this is also like the best example I have of knowing when to reuse parts and knowing when to ask for help. For example, the stock and the lever for the slab are based off of a flak stock and lever. That's the FLAK that Captain Slug made, which is another lever action blaster. Quite different from this blaster, but the stock and the lever are derived from that. And it's a remix that Vikinger did for the flak to make it like a fancy Old West style stock. I used that general outline. This is when Vikinger was still with us. We collaborated on the stock, kind of made it smoother, more svelte, and I made it put together a lot better. There's dovetails in here that make it really good. Again, one of the things that I really do a lot nowadays is dovetails. Love dovetails. Make things a lot easier to put together and design around. Dovetails are all over this. 3D printed dovetails instead of screws. And there's still a lot of screws on this, but dovetails are nice. And then the grip up here, it's not a pump grip. It's just a holding thing for the levering. This is the top slide from this. Flipped around upside down. Just like that.
Clever.
And then the plunger in here and the turnaround and the ram are all parts from the Silly Pistol. They're recycled. Because my first prototype for the slab was literally this blaster, and I put a lever on the front, and I made a stock for it. And it was terrible. It was so bad because the leverage is all wrong in that sort of setup. Then I moved to this layout after I talked with the maker of the Medusa lever action blaster. I talked with him a bit. I moved to this layout, and then I developed it into this full slab blaster from there. And this layout works a lot better, having the magwell moving, connecting to the lever. This is super smart, and I'm very happy that they helped me out with figuring this out in the early stages of the design. And then I figured it out from there, tweaking it quite a bit, and I figured out how to do the trigger mechanism in my own way that is a lot smoother than other ways that have previously been done. Some people in the past, generally on like bullpup blasters, they have tried to use like a piece of like wire that goes up front back to the trigger, and you kind of pull on it and the wire stretches and doesn't feel very great. On this, it's a piece of threaded rod up top that is being pushed on by the trigger. You can't see it, but this is moving back and forth when I'm pulling it. And it's pushing a little lever up here that then pushes on the sliding catch itself to release it. It looks a bit complicated, but it works really well. And then, as I said, the plunger mechanism, the front grip, ram, all those bits are from Silly Pistol. So reusing work is good, as long as you get permission from the other designer, if it is from a different designer, like the stock and the lever. And as long as you're like using your own thing, reuse as much as you possibly can, because there's no reason to like redesign the plunger from scratch each time they make something. Reuse it from a previous design. If it works, good. Use it again. It's good. So slab was the first thing that really made it big. Very happy with this design. After the slab was released, I worked on a bunch of projects that didn't release. I worked on a mag-fed shotgun that used Spring Thunder shells. That never really worked well, so I didn't release it. I worked on a pump action version of the Deuce Pro I actually have here. You got your Deuce Pro, pump action it, and fire it. This one has a bad air seal, so it's very loud. But yeah, got your pump action. But of course, it's a Deuce Pro. No one really uses Deuce Pros, so I released it. I'm not sure who uses it, which makes me
Now,
sad.
question with that. Did you modify the spring for the rotation issue that some people were experiencing?
So during the development of this pump action kit, I was one of the first people to try and kind of like diagnose the issues in the Deuce Pro. I found a fix that mostly worked, where I think that you had to like remove a part inside and stretch a spring or like replace it with a pin spring or something like that. It's been a long while since I did it. But that was like the first functional fix for the Deuce Pro that ever got released was the one that I worked on. And then eventually Dart Zone came out with their own fix. And as far as I know, newer Deuce Pros actually work better. I think there's still some issues with cylinders, but there's 3D printed cylinders that are out now that are lighter and don't suffer from those same issues. But by that point, it was kind of people kind of had the sour taste in their mouth. Nobody really downloaded this and built it, which was sad. But it was a fun design challenge. It was my first real like 3D printed kit for an existing off-the-shelf blaster, I think. So it's just pump action. It's got a new top rail. It had a stock attachment point at some point, which is no longer there. It has a brand new muzzle, which you might not have noticed. This is all 3D printed up here, but I made it mesh with the existing shape super well, which I'm really happy with. And that is a Scar barrel in there, to give better performance and accuracy and all that stuff. So I'm happy with this blaster as it is, but never really hit the big leagues, I guess you could say. Never really made it to popularity. But this is one of the things I work on.
Very cool.
Yeah. Shall I keep going, or do we have any questions? Or?
Yeah, let's. If you have any questions, go ahead and drop them down into the live chat section. And of course, give us that thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe and to register on the worldfoamalliance.org website. Let's kind of hit the major blaster designs that you came up with: Cynthia, Alchemist, and anything else that you can think of.
I can definitely do that. And then at the end, I can show some work in progress stuff with people people might be interested in.
I think so.
So hope that here's the microphone while I'm over there. Next major release after Slab was the Cynthia. This is a bolt action blaster. Prime that back, push it forwards, and then you fire a dart. And it works good. This was, as I said, the next release after the Slab. This was based off of the basic mechanism of the Indra by Captain Slug, but that blaster has always had some issues with the catch not working quite right. It was always kind of bendy, and there was a lot of user complaints while using it. And I really liked my Cynthia, and I had gone through and like fixed all the different bits of it. My Indra. I really liked my Indra. I had went through and fixed all the different bits of it to be much better than what Slug had originally designed. But at that point, there was more my parts than original Indra parts. And I was like, I can probably make a blaster from scratch that kind of fixes it 100% of the way. That's not an Indra. So that's what this is. This is an Indra that's fully fixed and improved. That's no longer an Indra. So it uses aluminum bars as the structure in the blaster. It's a bolt action prime, drive back, fire, all that stuff. It has a quick change barrel up front, so you unscrew this, and this should just pull straight out. This is a prototype, so it's a little bit sticky, but pull out the whole blaster, or the full barrel, jam it back in. Again, prototype, so it's sticky, but that just goes back in there and retighten it. This was call it in quick swap barrel. was another part from the Silly Pistol, or from, sorry, microphone. That was another part from the Silly Pistol that got reused in other designs. That was good. And then, yeah, it has none of the catch issues of the Indra, so actually, works good. I can put it back. Works real good, nice and smooth, all that stuff. Again, I need to make a V2 of this at some point because there's some user complaints that are perfectly valid and I should have seen ahead of time, such as having a brace from back here all the way to up here. So this middle area isn't quite as wobbly, because on mine, this doesn't really wobble much. I've seen some videos where people can pull this back and kind of get the ram caught outside of the blaster. It's a concern that I've seen, and I just haven't really had time to fix, but it's on the schedule. Aside from that, Cynthia's really good. Really happy with this design. Really good bolt action. I actually have a mag. Yeah. Bolt
Super
action
smooth.
blaster. It works. And then the next major release after Cynthia is Alchemist. This is my most recent release as well. And again, there's tons of different designs that happened between Cynthia and Alchemist that either didn't get released, are still in development, or got like into beta testing but aren't fully out yet. There's tons of different stuff. I'm always working on like 20 different projects at once, all getting progressed at different times. But Alchemist is the next thing that I worked on, or that got released, sorry. And it's a very, very smooth pump action blaster that uses ball bearings in the priming thing up there to prime the blaster really smoothly. So this is my attempt at making the best pump action blaster possible. So it has a spring guide, has compatibility with Lynx springs, which are wider and therefore smoother. Prime. It has ball bearings up front, so you can prime it super smoothly. Like I can probably, easily do it with one finger. And that's a SF25 TC with a spring spacer in the back. So it's a stout spring, but you can really get it done super easily with that smooth prime. Super flared magwell for super quick reloads, which I'm not going to assault your ears with, but you can really get it in there really good. And yeah, it's really smooth. It's really nice. And a lot of competitive players have been picking them up and playing with them and replacing their Talon Claws and whatnot. It's good. I like it. This was the most recent big release for me, is Alchemist. And then, of course, this was my attempt at making a pump action version of this, Cynthia. The aesthetics, I'm not sure if you can really see it there, but especially in like the front end, it's very similar because they used to be the same blaster. You really see it in this old proof of concept prototype. Again, I hit the microphone. I'm so sorry. But this was a pump action Cynthia that again has ball bearings and the priming grip and all that stuff to make it super smooth. So this then became this after like 4 or 5 months of prototyping and tweaks and all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean,
that's all my major releases.
Yeah, just by your blaster parade here, you really kind of see the thought process and evolution of earlier iterations making their way into the newer designs. It's pretty incredible, actually. And I will say, I know that I know for a fact that I'm a competitive player. We host competitive practices here in the Maryland area, or opportunities to practice competitively. And I will say, as far as 3D printed blasters go, the ones you're seeing on the field now are the Lynx and the Alchemist. So definitely in good company for sure. So, but That's fantastic. I wish we had more time because I am totally digging it and loving all the background info that you're providing of what went into kind of the thought process of these blaster design. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk about and have you on here for this show this evening. Question is, and again, this can go out for the chat as well. If you're in the live chat, if you have a question for Silly. But what do you have any tips for people? And you kind of mentioned this before. Kind of find something that you want to do and build off of that foundation. Maybe it's been set before. But do you have any tips for people that are looking into getting into blaster design or just overall in general? Any tips for people and blaster designing?
My first piece of advice is don't be afraid to ask questions of people that already do stuff. It's generally nice to like Google your question first and make sure that you're not like asking someone something super simple and just kind of wasting their time. But if you're looking for advice on a piece of work that you're or a design that you're working on, just ask. A lot of people are more than happy to just, oh yeah, what needs improvement, what is good on design. Did they try a similar thing in the past and they have experiences that like they can help you out with your thing since it's similar. Everyone is generally very cooperative and collaborative in the hobby, so just ask, and people are generally very willing to share information and sometimes even files. One of the things that I do is, of course, I release all of my files for free, along with source files, so you can go into Fusion 360 or SolidWorks or whatever your modeling software of choice is, and look at exactly how everything works and how it's all laid out, and all of the old versions of it and everything. But I also released a ton of my old failed designs, so people can go and see what doesn't work. And if they find something there that they like, they can go and finish it. And like, all of my ideas are open. Do with it what you want. So yeah, don't be afraid to ask. Next piece of advice is don't be afraid to tread on the same path as other people. There are tons of different blasters that are the same layout as the Talon Claw, but everyone kind of does it in their own way, and that's kind of special. Being able to work on design, not because it's better than something else, but because you want to work on it, that's a pretty healthy mindset, and I like it. And then I think the last piece of advice is, let me pick a good one. Try to learn your modeling software at least a little bit before you start modeling. I see a lot of people trying to make a blaster design, and the most complex thing that they can make in their CAD software of choice is a rectangle, and that's it. Not to like kind of stamp out your flame of passion, but like you need to. There's like a barrier of entry, a minimum viable amount of knowledge that you kind of need to have in order to work on blaster design. My first two blaster designs that never even made it out of CAD both failed because I was still learning Fusion 360. I had not learned any useful parts of it, and they were all made out of rectangles with like some simple holes drilled through it. And that's it. No other complex modeling of any sort. So I hadn't learned enough to make something worthy of my time. So by trying stuff and failing, I learned some more through other various projects. Instead of making my own full blaster, I edited files by Captain Slug, made Slamfire kits for his blasters. That was a good learning experience. After I got some knowledge in the program, I was able to start working on my own things. But don't try to just go straight for making your own thing, because you might kind of get burnt out and lose passion for blaster design at that moment or as a whole. So kind of like hone your skills in a simpler way. Make a mod kit. edit an existing homemade to have your name on it or something. Learn how to do things first, then go and make your own thing from scratch.
And just from what you said, it sounds like also don't be afraid to fail. You're going to fail, but it's going to lead to other opportunities. So
definitely. I have had probably at this point more than 100 failed blaster designs for the amount of stuff that I've released. And I've released a lot of things, but it's like a 1-to-5 ratio of released stuff to failed stuff, or stuff that's still in development, or stuff that's like kind of set aside for later. Things aren't going to get released. That's part of the process. Not everything that is made is going to work correctly. There needs to be things that don't work correctly in order for people to learn, and then they make something that's better. A quick example, because I know that we're a little bit short on time, but a quick example of that would be the Lynx by Orion Blasters. Extremely popular blaster. He had a previous design called the Taurus, which was not very popular. It was the same sort of layout. It was a bullpup. Found out the things that didn't work in the Taurus, mainly the plunger system and some of the bulkiness. He fixed that in the original Lynx. Figured out the parts that didn't work on that, kind of and they made the Lynx V2. And that's what tons of people are using all over competitive fields everywhere. Everybody has failures. Everybody's going to have stepping stones. Don't be afraid of things not working out the first time.
Yeah, that's great. And then again, we're short on time, but I think the viewers would love to see kind of your whips that you got going on right now, if you don't mind. I know for one thing, I'm a huge AEB fan, and I've been following the process of your AEBs that you've been making. But yeah, if you want to quickly showcase kind of some of the stuff that you're working on in the background, I think that's what people came to see. So what do we got?
Okay. I got a bunch of stuff, but I'm going to go through it relatively quickly. If you want to see in-depth information on these, I have a YouTube channel where I post in-depth information on everything, or pretty much everything. So go there and watch videos, because I'll show you exactly how I modeled my own new shell ecosystem and a magazine for shells that can shoot 4 elite darts at once in rapid fire. Like that, just for an example. Stuff. So much stuff. One of the things that I've recently picked back up is this. This is Foxbat. This is a mag and grip blaster using angled talons or straight talons. It's not both in the same grip. There is a different grip for straight talons. This is a much older version, but see, you got a straight talon grip for your straight talons. This is a curved talon, but it's a straight up and down, not angled in. Anyway, it's a blaster, and it has angled talons and a ball detent in there to hold the magazine in place, and it's really good. And it's giant, and it has like 300 FPS if you have it with a long enough barrel and spring. It's good. Top slide prime, fire, all that stuff. You can also have a T-pole on the back. Pretty good. And then you can also have a pump action grip on the side. This is an older prototype where it doesn't quite work, but you can have a pump grip on the side. Then you get basically a mag and grip primary. I have another blaster, which is in a similar format, but it's more like an Alchemist in the back with a mag and grip and a pump action down here. I don't have a name for that. I called it the Pit Viper, which is a name of a firearm. I can't sell that because you're selling metal parts named after a firearm. So not that named anymore. But whatever it's going to be named, it's basically a pump action thing down here. Got a mag and grip here. Got a stock back here. And it's good. And it's basically a mag and grip Alchemist. That's another thing that I'm working on. I don't have one printed yet. What I do have printed is, you said that you like AEGs, or AEBs, sorry. This is Warlock. This is a automatic Springer blaster that has a giant motor in the front. If we can go full screen here, I can probably show you all the little nooks and crannies of this, but got a giant motor in the front, and then that has a rack and pinion, or up here, that then primes this giant plunger tube in the back, back and forth, and it automatically fires darts. And on this side, we got a little poorly printed clear window, so you can see the gear in there kind of spinning around whenever you fire it. I don't currently have a battery in this, but yeah, it's an AEB, so you pull down the trigger, and it primes the spring and fires, and chambers the dart and all that stuff. This is, I think, my 4th AEB design. None of them have been fully released, because AEB designing for 3D printing is really hard. But it's all sort of, I'm kind of taking the hit in terms of spending money on filament and spending time, so that other people further on in a few years can like have 3D printed AEBs, because currently there's basically none. So I'm kind of doing a lot of the legwork, figuring out what things work, what things don't, how to design things, and then releasing all those bits online for free so other people can design their own.
What kind of performance is that getting? Is it running off 3S, 4S?
So this one in particular is running off of a 3S battery. Battery is stored here in the back. I have like 4 different ABs, so it's hard to remember the aspects of each one, but the battery's stored back here. This stock here is a battery storage. And then wires go all the way down here to the motor, and all the way back to the trigger, and all the way back here. Lots of wire. But it's a 3S battery running a 550 size motor, so it's really big, with a 100-to-1 gearbox on the top, which is metal. It's a metal planetary gearbox, like in drills. Goes into a printed gear and rack and pinion, primes the thingy. This has a 788 spring in it, and this I think has 80 millimeters of prime, I think. Where, due to this being a prototype, I haven't been able to get the timing correct to have it both running the motor and firing correctly, because by the time that this thing reaches the front, it's firing before the breech is fully closed. So I haven't been able to get FPS numbers of this in full auto, but by manually cycling this with this thingy up here, I've been able to get some FPS numbers, and this is like getting 180-ish, give or take. It's good so far. It's very promising, but it's not quite there yet. And that's pretty much how all of the AEBs have gone, where they're so close to being good, but it's so hard to get them across that little final hurdle. And that's why, you know, there haven't been any of these in the hobby before. It's because they're a giant pain in the butt to design, cost a lot to prototype, take a lot of time to design. Just, yeah. I have a Patreon moment.
Support the mayhem.
Yes. Before that blaster, there was this, which was, this is covered in dust. This was Battle Mage. The motor on that, the front grip, the giant black front grip, used to be back here in the stock. And then we have a big wheel here, kind of spun this back and forth like the side of a steam locomotive. We kind of slide this back and forth and bring the breech back and forth. The plunger tube is up here, sort of like Foxbat, which I showed earlier. This, it has a plunger tube up here, and then it would kind of shoot like that. This one I kind of set aside because I could never get the breech properly timed. Again, same issue as Warlock, where it's firing before the breech is fully closed. This setup of the motor is a lot harder to fix that issue on. So I set this aside, did Warlock, where it's a completely different motor and plunger tube setup, where even though I'm having the same issue of the breech closing not soon enough, it's way easier to fix on Warlock than it was on this. So this has been released, fully released online for people to kind of download and try and see if they can figure it out, because I don't want all of this work to go away, even though I'm not doing anything with it. So I kind of put it up there, and it's like, hey, this doesn't fully work. You can probably make it work. Good luck. here's some notes and stuff as to how exactly it's not working. Try and figure out a solution. And there's like 6 people or 7 people that are all independently working on making this work with like brushless motors or different ways of doing the breach or different plungers and all that stuff. But yeah, this came before Warlock. This walked so Warlock could run. My blaster platform. Got a few other blasters I want to cover. Yeah, we're not too awful on time. That's what, 3 blasters in 10 minutes. That's not bad. As I said, this is Foxbat. This is a different Foxbat. And it fires real good. This was derived from Battle Mage. I literally took the Battle Mage, which was the AV that I just showed. I chopped off the front, and I stuck a grip on it, and then I polished it a bunch for like 8 months, and that's what this is. It's a similar mechanism. Again, reuse parts. You can make cool things. Even if one project doesn't work out, you can probably make another project.
That's right.
And one thing that I definitely want to show before we have to leave, before I get cut out for time, because I know that it's running a bit long. I got this. This is a shell-fed single-shot pistol. I know that Boomstick Mods has printed one of these in beta testing. Ignore this giant, like, eyeball poking out rod up here. That's supposed to be cut flush. I just didn't have my bolt cutters on hand when I built this. Anyway, this is a simple T-prime pistol. Got your T-prime back there. Pat it back. You fire it. Good air seal. And then, yeah, it's a simple T-prime pistol, but uses silly shells. This is my new shell platform for shell ejecting and shell fed blasters. This has all of the like magazine feeding characteristics of like a fly point shell, which are those super small ones that MHP uses. I think that's MHP that uses that. Whoever did the Winchester and the fly point, right. Those, but they're really big, and they fit 4 elite darts in there. And they're designed to be rimless. They don't have a rim sticking out past the back of the shell. If I grab a Spring Thunder shell, you can see that the rim extends past the back of the outer diameter of the wall. Easier to see this way. You can see the rim is still poking out past the side profile of the shell. That means that you can't really feed this well in magazines, because the rims of each shell will hit against each other and not feed correctly. And this shell can only fit 2 elite darts in once, which is really good. And this was like the first 3D printed shell standard that really worked well in the hobby. But I think that it's time to get something that does more features and is easier to like make a lot of, which is what these are. So these are silly shells. This one is a Mega XL silly shell. A giant hole in the front. Got, I think this one's Ultra Dart. Got Rival. 3 Rival bowls. I got, what's this? This is the 4X Elite Dart. You can fit 4 Elite Darts in there. That's a 3X. Yeah. So we got a bunch of different shell types, and it can fit more ammo in there. And because it has no rim, or no rim extending past the side of the shell, you can feed them in and out of magazines super easily without having to deal with any of the issues of Spring Thunder or other similar shells like that. So I'm hoping to get like 3 or 4 different blasters that use these shells. So that would be the pistol, the fed shell ejecting shotgun.
Ooh.
This is a prototype of, with a flappy loading gate in the bottom.
Awesome.
So that would have a tube mag out here. A box mag fed shell ejecting shotgun, which would basically be this, but with that there. And I'm working on a under barrel grenade launcher type thing that uses these, where the barrel kind of pops out to the side, and you load a shell in, close it, and then fire, and then pop it open, and it ejects.
Cool.
And that would have a plunger tube in the grip, like a pilot. And I've been modeling that. And then also I'm working on a version of the shell-fed shotgun blaster like this that uses a box mag, but it's not going to be detachable. So if you look at like the Ultra 3, where it's sort of like a battle axe shape and you got the big internal magazine in the front, that's basically going to be this, but shell-fed. You got your grip back here. You don't really have anything in front of the magazine, and then it's just going to feed shells up, push them forwards a little bit, fire, and then pull them out the back and eject them. And that's just going to be an internal magazine. So this doesn't come off. You just feed in new shells in through the top. And that should work really well. Really looking forward to working on it. I have a rough mock-up of that from like a year ago when I started working on these shells. But that one isn't quite far enough to be printed. This pistol, since it's so simple, is the first thing that has been finished. Not this exact printing of it. This is like an old version. But this is like the first thing that is done, as much as something can be done in the foam world. But kind of load the shells there, then you take them off. I'm working on like an ejection button here where you can kind of like flick or push something down here that'll kind of fling the shells up and off. But yeah, it's a simple little pistol, shoots all of the different silly shells with all the different ammo types, tons of different ammo types. Yeah, you can use it to kill I don't know, a shield user with a Mega XL dart, and then I don't know, use rival balls. I don't know what shell people use different ammo types for in one game. But I don't know. You can use Mega one time and Mega XL the next time, and use darts and balls and have big old cloud of darts coming off of your blaster. It's great.
They use them. They use them all. Trust me. If you've ever played with broomstick mods, you'd know. So
I'm also working on a version of that shell thing, which will work on the PBR bow. This is the
very
PBR bow.
Cool.
Simple to back and really spell. Yeah. And I have a few more work in progress things to go over. People that watched the Foamsgiving stream probably saw me suffering with this thing, trying to shoot myself with Mega XL. This is a revolver that fires Mega XL darts off the front, and it has really bad catch issues right now because I haven't redesigned the catching bits yet and printed them. But theoretically, this should be a pump action blaster that then advances this cylinder one dart over each time that it fires, like that. And there we go. So it kind of works right now, needs some more tweaking. But this will be a rapid fire pump action rate. Prime, fire, prime, fire, prime, fire. And then this will have different ammo types, sort of similar to the silly shells, where I'm just going to take the geometry from this for 4 elites, for example, and stick it in these holes. So you can have a different cylinder on there for, 4 darts per shot times 5. Or you can fire Mega XL darts, that. Or you can fire, Mega or whatever you want.
That's awesome.
Yeah. That's that thing. Again, doesn't have a name. And it's sort of similar to the old... Oh, there's like an old vintage blaster. Vintage. At this point, like early 2010s is vintage. Yeah, there's an older off-the-shelf blaster similar to this that currently is escaping my mind. But it's a homemade version, and it's cool, and it fires all the ammos, and that's awesome.
Very cool. If you're in the live chat and you like what you see, let us know what your favorite work in progress silly blaster that you've seen is. I think they all look really cool, so it's going to be a tough answer, and tough question to answer. So, but if you're in the live chat, tell us what you're excited for with what Silly's showing us.
Yeah, and something for me, if you don't mind, if people can tell me something that they want to see me work on, tell me in chat, and I'll read it back on the VOD upload. Just if you have some idea and you want to see a blaster like it, tell me so I can work on it, because I like working on things. No promises if it will get released, because as I said, 1-to-5 ratio on things that get worked on versus released. I'll give it a try. Blaster pile is currently getting unwieldy, starting to collapse. This, another work in progress. This is Kingfisher. This is a pump action blaster with a side magwell, like that. Got the magwell coming out the side. Then this has the same amount of prime as a Caliburn, but it's like a semi bullpup, where you got the plunger tube back here, we got the spring up here. It is a more modern version of the ESLT homemade, which used to be made out of PVC. But this is a 3D printed version. Warning is that the current thing holding this back from being released is that the pump grip rubs against the body shell a lot and makes an awful sound. So I'm going to mute my microphone while I prime this. It is truly awful. I'm not going to subject the viewers to that. But this has a plunger back here, which is connected by a rod to the spring, which is up here. This blaster uses an extension spring in like this area up here, where instead of being a compression spring, oh, I actually have my spring tester here, which I 3D printed recently. Instead of being a compression spring, where you compress it, prime it, it's an extension spring where you pull it, you prime it. So this has a extension spring up here connected to that giant rod that the plunger is connected to up here, and that's there. And then it just primes it back, and then it kind of pulls the entire plunger forwards to fire. And then there's a turnaround, or a, is this a turnaround? No, this would be a turnaroundant, like on the silly pistol. It has a turnaround here where the air goes in like that, goes up, and then goes out that way. And then there is a ram here kind of just chilling on the side, kind of having a good time back here. And that goes really far to chamber. Sorry for the sound. But yeah. That is Kingfisher. And this has like Caliburn performance. I think that it's a little bit below Caliburn performance on this prototype, because it's prototype, air seals aren't 100%. Some losses in like barrel length versus plunger tube usage, what spring I'm using, all that stuff. But yeah, basically Caliburn performance on a side magazine semi bullpup thing, which is cool, and I like it. It sounds really cool. It sounds like a guitar string because you're kind of plucking it when you fire. It's worth noting that this uses an extension spring up here. However, I also made it so you can still use a compression spring here. So you can either use the front and put your pull to prime spring up there, or you can use a normal like a Caliburn spring or a Talon Claw spring back like this area back here, and that will still compress it to prime and still pull the plunger forwards.
Very cool.
Yeah, it's funky, and I like funky things. And you can kind of see the sear here kind of gives you a little peekaboo when you pull the trigger. And that's just to save space, because you got to make it optimized. If you had to hide the sear completely, this would be a little bit longer. Blaster would be a little bit longer. Nobody wants that. So yeah, nice little blaster. Haven't really worked on it in a few months, since I think before Christmas. But yeah, it's good. It's very close to being done for release. It's just I don't really see it being extremely popular. So I've worked on other projects that are more likely to be popular, because gotta chase trends or whatever. But I like it. It was a fun personal project, which I will eventually release once I fix some small things on it.
Let's do one more.
Yep. Last thing it just happens to be that we've gotten through literally everything I had here on the pile.
Nice.
Got through the shells, the silly pistol, thumper, all of the previous releases, shell pistol, box bat, that thing that I said previously, and we got a musket.
That is awesome.
So this is what I was talking about with being stupid, but you got to be so stupid that it loops back around to being smart. This is a foam flinging musket where you got your priming rod, you stick it on the floor.
That is awesome.
Jam this down the barrel to prime it. Oh god, this has a heavy spring. There we go. Jam it down the barrel to prime it. Then you need to stick a dart down there. I actually made the muzzle removable on this prototype.
That
because
is
it was hard
awesome.
to load. But yeah, dart goes down there. Then you pull the thingy to fire it, and it fires. And
That is
do it all
amazing.
again. Yeah, it's got a little flintlock on the side because you know musket. You gotta do all the muskety things. But yeah, again, it's fine to do something stupid. Stupid things can still be really fun, and this has been really fun. I like this. But yeah. So that is pretty much all of my work in progresses. I also have this little baby pistol that I worked on recently as a fun side project. But that's it. That's literally all that I have to show. It's a little pistol. It's a front loader with some dart storage. It's based off the Nerf Reflex 6 or whatever it is. But it's homemade, has a big spring in it, shoots slightly harder. It was a fun side project. I like it.
Very cool.
Yeah,
Well,
that's all I've got.
Well,
finally.
Very cool. Well, we play a version, a game type that we call Revolutionary War. Boom calls it Civil War. There's a debate to be made, but it's basically a firing squad game, and I'm actually looking forward to maybe stocking some of those muskets just for that game type. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, Silly, I wish we had more time. I know we could go on for hours just because, you know, that's what Blaster Design does. You said it yourself, you work on multiple designs at the same time. So, you know, the discussion could go on for days, weeks, months, possibly. But I would love to get you back on here at some point. Also, I just wanted to thank you again for your time and contribution to being one of the guest hosts for the Foamsgiving live stream, and we hope to have you back again for this year's stream. But yeah, where do you see yourself in the hobby in the near future, and where do you see Blaster Design going?
I'm expecting to see there's a few different trends that are kind of going in certain directions at the moment. One of those is AEB design. Even though I've been working on a bunch of AEBs and they're going mostly well, and I'm basically the only one that's kind of sharing things publicly, there is a lot of different 3D printed AEBs that are being worked on all the time that the designers haven't necessarily gone public with. There's lots of stuff to look forwards to on AEBs. It's a completely different point as to like, how do you manage that during like a game mode? Like, do you treat them as flywheelers, but they're like the best flywheelers possible because they have more power and accuracy and all that stuff? Do you treat them like springers? Are they their own thing? Because like it runs the risk of becoming airsoft, sort of. So like you always fire no matter what, and you can just pull the trigger all the time, and you got infinite mags and all that stuff. It's a way that the hobby is going. If that's a positive thing is a different thing. But the design aspect of it is incredibly interesting. So there's probably going to be a lot more of those becoming public in the coming year or two. Another thing that is becoming more common is super low hardware blasters. Domochevsky has been working on those X-Shot Micro, I think is the name of the blaster.
Right.
Like little tiny reshells, not a lot of hardware. 3D prints, super easy. I think there's going to be a lot more things like that, as well as things from Bruce where he is working on cool prototype things that are being worked on. Cool prototype things that can't necessarily talk about much. Lots of cool stuff. But super low hardware things like that, where, it's elastic powered and you can have fun, but it's not going to like rip a hole in your wall. And yeah, I think that there's going to be a lot more focus on lower cost homemates, a lot more focus on AEBs, and I'm hoping that there's going to be a lot more focus on shell ejecting stuff once this becomes public, maybe around April or the month after, maybe. But yeah, hopefully more shell ejecting stuff later in the year. But yeah, those are the main trends that I see going, as well as people eking every little bit of performance that they can out of existing systems, such as
Right.
making threaded ramrods that attach to your talon claw and whatnot way easier than using set screws, and have a perfect air seal. Are being made by RoboMan in small test batch, possibly, maybe. But yeah, stuff like that.
Very,
I think there's going to be a lot more cool stuff like that, as well as maybe HPA,
Very-
as RoboMan's working on new stuff.
all right. Someone mentioned that down in the chat. Yeah, I think the pandemic and where we're at now really kind of put us in this kind of phase where we're really spoiled by innovation and new designs that are coming out. It's going to be really exciting to see, especially in the near future with comp and competitive play, and just where kind of things are leading to in general with the hobby. But
one more thing, more blasters from outside the US. There's going to be a lot of the Chinese companies are starting to bring stuff into the US, and it is not copies. It is individuals making stuff, really cool stuff, and finally making the push into the US. Don't discount stuff in your mind because it's Chinese or coming from some place where you can't read all the instructions. There's lots of cool stuff coming soon that I can't necessarily talk about, but some cool things in China coming over. So yeah, that was my last bit. Sorry to interrupt you.
No worries. A lot of really cool stuff. Like we were saying, there's a lot of innovation going on. We're really at this really interesting precipice, I think, of really kind of blowing up. And again, that's kind of why the World Foam Alliance is here to kind of be a resource and network for people to connect together. So once again, give us a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to register yourself or your club on the worldfoamalliance.org website. I want to thank Silly again. Thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure. Where can people find you?
All right. I have a YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/Sillybutts. I have a website, which is stuffbysilly.com. I have some blasters there and links to where you can buy them. And then I release all of my files on my GitHub, which is github.com/Sillybutts. And I have a Reddit where I share a lot of my work in progress stuff, which is reddit.com/user/sillythegamer, because Sillybutts was a taken username already, which sucks. But yeah, that's where you can find me. And I post lots of updates on my YouTube. Go there, look at behind the scenes stuff, because it's good. Yeah.
It's great. So once again, really appreciate you joining us. I want to thank all the viewers and everyone watching. Thank you for joining us this evening. Next Wednesday will be the next episode of Get Off My Lawn with none other than Captain Xavier and Al the Geek. And I do believe we will be having a guest host with Bots and Blasters, so make sure to tune in for that. And then I'll be back on again with the Foam Zone for the next episode the following Wednesday with our good friend Brett, who sometimes wears a beret. So make sure you stay tuned for that. Once again, really appreciate everyone joining us. Thank you, Sillybutts. Hope to see you guys soon. And don't forget to Dart Sweep. We'll catch you next time.